If you like the grungy look, something interesting, something different, something that you can only get with specific old vintage lenses, then this video is for you. I've been shooting with vintage lenses for over 2 years now, and I've been lucky enough to visit a few vintage markets where I could stock up, and now I have more than 9 different vintage lenses. We'll explore the charm of Japanese vintage lenses like the Canon FD, Komura and Petri, and compare them to the more grungy Soviet classics like the Jupiter 9, the Mir and the Helios. I'll show you how these lenses stack up, and if you're looking to dive into the world of vintage lenses, which one should you go for? So why even would you shoot with vintage lenses when photography lenses or just brand new cine lenses are perfect, are beautiful, are sharp? Well, my favorite reason is they're grungy and the look, it's just different. First of all, every single vintage lens that you'll find, it's in a different condition. Not all of them are perfect, which means they all deliver a very slightly different feeling. And with this feeling comes a bit more creativity, in my opinion at least. And also, you can get very interesting bokeh, like in this Soviet set that I got modified by Iron Glass to have this anamorphic, straight, dreamy bokeh, but also the flares that you can get from some of these lenses, it's pretty insane. With that said, to be honest, my favorite part of vintage lenses is that you don't have to spend $500, $1,000, $2,000 for one lens, but I mean, if you're looking for one in very, very good condition, maybe $100, but you can find any of these lenses that I'm gonna go through in this video for anywhere between 10 to 15, up to $50 or $60, depending on the condition. But this makes vintage lenses also very interesting in my opinion, because you can have so many more and you can try so many more things. So let's dive right into the video. Let's start with Japanese lenses. These lenses were the gold standard for filmmakers and photographers back in the day, and their build quality still holds up today. Known for sharpness and color accuracy, perfect if you want clean, professional results with just a hint of vintage charm. These lenses come in a wide variety of focal lengths, from ultra-wide 24mm to fast 50mm and telephoto options. So far, I only had the chance of testing out the 28mm that I randomly found, as well as their 50mm. The 50mm is actually an FL version, which is the version earlier of the FD lenses. I honestly don't see much difference, and I can be using in the same video a 28 and a 50 Canon FD and FL, and in the color grading and everything, I just don't see any difference. Obviously, the main reason the FL and the FD are different is the coating. The FL usually is a lot cheaper and FD is usually a lot more expensive, but it's kind of the same lens, it's kind of the same glass, and you won't really see any difference. So if you find an FL version, maybe go for that one if it's a little bit cheaper. Or if you want to stick to the classic, go with FD. And the FD is such a classic because it's so similar to the Canon K35, which are probably some of the most celebrated Hollywood cinema lenses. These are lesser known gems with unique color rendering and slightly lower contrast. Komura lenses are praised for their creamy bokeh and subtle vintage warmth, making them excellent for portraits and cinematic shots. The one I have right here is the 35mm, and honestly, if you compare it to the Canon FD, it's definitely less sharp and it's definitely a bit softer in the corners, and it gives out this dreamy look. Honestly, that's something I actually chase and like, so really depending on what you want to achieve. But one thing that I can recognize clearly is that Canon FD, for example, recognize color very, very well, probably because of the quality of the glass. While something like this Komura, it's a lot harder to color grade and the colors just fall apart a lot easier because, you know, the glass is just not high quality as much as the Canon FD. Affordable and unusual, Petri lenses often have more pronounced imperfections, like visible flares, color fringing, and soft corners. But that's where the vintage lens charm is at. See, honestly, the reason why we all love vintage lenses, it's because of this specific quality. We don't want something perfect, otherwise I would just get a Sigma or a Sony or a Canon lens. We want something imperfect, we want something different, we want something unique. This is why we love vintage lenses. And this is why Petri is slowly getting to the point of being one of my favorite. It's a very specific lens, especially the one that I have. I actually have two, and one it's kind of broken. But the second one also has this like weird light leak imperfection that comes through the glass, I believe. And it just creates this very, very cool effect that it's something created within the lens, within the camera, which is, it's not an overlay that you can just add. It's something that comes to the lens, so adds that extra level of like film look to your footage. The only problem with Petri is that these lenses were only made for Petri specific cameras, so you can't find any adapters from Petri to Sony. But I did find this website that were talking about 3D printed adapter from Petri lenses to Sony. So I just sent that off to my guy here in Bali who does 3D printing, and he made an adapter and now it just works. So yeah, I guess you just gotta get creative sometimes. Now let's switch gears to Soviet lenses. These were mass produced, but everybody loves them for the build quality and their specific look. The king of swirly bokeh, the Helios 44-2 58mm f2 lens is arguably one of the most famous Soviet lenses. Its optical look includes unique swirly bokeh and slightly desaturated tones, as well as a very filmic low contrast, making this lens perfect for artistic and experimental work. This was my very first vintage lens, not this one specifically because this is rehoused by Iron Glass and it's got this more anamorphic feeling bokeh, but the other one I got it for about $40 US, was in great conditions. It had this beautiful swirly bokeh, but I think I like it more rehoused with anamorphic bokeh just because I can match this to the whole set. With that said, if you do want to grab this lens, you can probably find a very good condition one for about $50 or rehoused for about $300 to $400. While the Helios was my first Soviet lens, this was my most awaited and for sure my favorite out of the pack. The Jupiter 9 is celebrated for its ability to produce creamy, dreamy bokeh with a low sharpness wide open. It's just the most beautiful, flattering filmic lens I ever used, and it's kinda hard not to keep this lens on my camera at all time. This is the Jupiter 9 rehoused with anamorphic bokeh from Iron Glass, and this is what it looks like on a studio setting. Pretty cool, right? Wide-angle lens with a bold, vintage character. The mirror lenses are the wide-angle version of the Helios and Jupiters and usually come at 29mm and 37mm. The mirror 37mm is my go-to whenever I'm shooting on my Soviet set and I need something wide or just any generic shot or even a studio shoot like this one. In this occasion, I actually like more the Jupiter 9s because it gives them more intimate, super portrait looking vibe, but I used the mirror in the past and I just love the look, and it's slightly slower at 2.8 compared to f2 the Helios and f1.8 the Jupiter 9, but it still looks great and it gives you that beautiful Soviet look. To give you a real sense how these lenses perform against each other, I set up a scene for some tests. Here's a comparison showing how they handle bokeh, flares, sharpness and color rendering. So what vintage lens should you pick? Well, it really depends on the budget and on the style. If you want something a bit more cleaner but still with a nice vintage look, I would 100% recommend the Canon FDs. Although to grab a nice set of Canon FDs, you'll probably end up spending between $500 to $1,000. But if you want to really stand out and create something very unique, I recommend the Helios or just a Soviet set in general, and the Petri. The Petri is definitely the underdog here, and if you find it for a few bucks, I 100% recommend to buy one, 3D print an adapter for your camera, and try this magic out because I actually really love it. No matter what you choose, vintage lenses will force you to slow down and embrace their imperfection. This overall will make you a better filmmaker. To be honest, if you're just diving deeper into vintage lenses right now, what I recommend doing is just buying a few very bad quality secondhand ones and try and play around with them and see if you actually enjoy shooting with them. If you do, get a nicer set, and then cine mod them with some focus gears just to make your job easier. I'm also aware there are a lot more different vintage lenses that I'm hoping to get my hands on, but this is what I have so far, this is what I've been trying so far, so this is what I wanted to talk about you guys so far. I think the Japanese and the Soviet side is definitely the biggest war in between vintage lenses, but there are more vintage lenses like the Contax Zeiss, for example, which is something I'm actually seeking right now, but these are definitely more on the expensive side. So if you do want to get into the Contax Zeiss, I recommend actually trying the Canon FDs first, for example, or a Komura, or even a Soviet set, just to understand if you like the whole vintage ecosystem, and then go from there. That's all for this one, guys. Thank you so much for sticking around until here. If you did so, leave a like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you guys next week in the next video.